El siguiente programa es una presentación de la Asociación de Lesiones Cerebrales de Nebraska. Contiene imágenes y descripciones detalladas del abuso infantil. Algunos espectadores pueden encontrar este contenido angustioso o desencadenante. Esta es mi hija Alexis. A los 14 meses, solo 6 semanas después de su chequeo de 1 año con su pediatra, Alexis estaba prosperando. Su vocabulario era el doble que el de un niño promedio de su edad. Su desarrollo físico también estaba por delante. No había tenido nada peor que una infección de oído y un lunar superficial en la cabeza. Alexis era una niña de 1 año feliz y en pleno funcionamiento. El 3 de abril de 2008, llevamos a Alexis a la guardería. El único relato de lo que sucedió después de que nos fuimos es de la proveedora de la guardería, el único adulto en el hogar en ese momento. Alexis estaba llorando cuando nos fuimos. Por esa razón la pusieron en un tiempo fuera. Pero Alexis siguió a la proveedora de la guardería fuera de la habitación. Así que Alexis fue puesta en un tiempo fuera por segunda vez. Una vez más, Alexis siguió a la proveedora fuera de la habitación. Fue justo antes de que la sentaran por tercera vez que los únicos detalles que se proporcionaron sobre lo sucedido. La proveedora solo dijo que todo sucedió muy rápido. Según los investigadores y más de una docena de médicos, Alexis fue sacudida y arrojada violentamente. Esta es mi hija, 72 horas después. Ha estado en coma inducida médicamente durante 3 días. Este es su momento más crítico. Determinará si vivirá o morirá. El cerebro de Alexis está en su punto máximo de inflamación. El tejido blando de su cerebro está siendo presionado contra su cráneo, destruyendo permanentemente la materia cerebral que nunca podrá ser recuperada. Si una parte es destruida, ella podría quedar ciega por el resto de su vida. Otra, y es posible que nunca pueda comer ni beber. Puede hacer que nunca pueda mover un lado de su cuerpo o que nunca pueda leer o controlar sus emociones. Según nuestros médicos en este momento, hay más posibilidades que se quede en este estado por el resto de su vida. La razón: alguien no pudo controlar sus emociones y se desquitó con nuestra hija. Alexis sobreviviría, pero ningún aspecto de su vida ha sido fácil desde ese día. La agresión la dejó ciega, sin poder comer ni beber, hablar ni mover los brazos y las piernas. Casi 3,000 horas de rehabilitación intensa, a veces insoportablemente dolorosa, han permitido que algunos de esos déficits regresen. La recuperación completa no existe a lo que comúnmente se conoce como síndrome del bebé sacudido o traumatismo craneal abusivo.
Abusive head trauma is the medical term for shaken baby syndrome. It includes kids who are shaken, but also those who are injured in other ways, like being hit or slammed. It is the result of what happens when somebody injures a child. What we typically see when children are injured in this way is bleeding around the brain. We'll see brain injury, so the child not acting well, anything from being very, very sleepy to having seizures to being completely unresponsive. And we may see bleeding in the back of the eyes, which are called retinal hemorrhaging. And then frequently we'll see other injuries like bruises or broken bones or other areas of trauma where somebody has hurt them.
El traumatismo craneal abusivo es la principal causa de lesiones mortales en la cabeza en niños menores de 2 años. Una cuarta parte de los pacientes con traumatismo craneoencefálico grave no sobreviven. El 80% de los sobrevivientes sufren discapacidades permanentes, incluidos retrasos en el desarrollo, trastornos del aprendizaje, convulsiones, debilidad y discapacidades visuales. Casos tan graves como el que le sucedió a Alexis se cuentan por miles cada año en Estados Unidos. Pero varias organizaciones estiman que hay hasta 50,000 casos de traumatismo craneoencefálico abusivo anualmente que no fueron reportados. Esto puede resultar en algo menor, como una conmoción cerebral, o puede que ni siquiera aparezca en un niño hasta años después, como una discapacidad de aprendizaje o una lucha socioemocional.
They may look normal leaving the hospital or appear pretty well doing what normal babies do, but then they hit 5, 6, 7 and they have to learn and they have to sit still and they start to struggle with that.
Pero en lo que respecta a los casos extremos como el de Alexis, la parte verdaderamente frustrante es mirar a través de sitios web de noticias o periódicos en un día cualquiera. Y verás que esto sucede una y otra vez. Madres, padres, niñeras, abuelos, novios, novias, incapaces de calmar a un bebé, a un niño en una situación estresante, los incapacita permanentemente o incluso los mata.
The idea that there are good parents and bad parents and you're born that way, outside of a very, very small number, there is evil in the world. I don't want to deny that. But most parents that harm their children they didn't get up that morning to say, today I'm going to abuse my child. They got up this morning thinking they were going to be available for their child.
Mientras nuestra familia aún vivía en el hospital de Lincoln, Nebraska, solo tuvimos que mirar 2 puertas más adelante en el pasillo para encontrar a una familia que experimentaba el mismo dolor que nosotros.
My phone rang and it was Scott's number on the caller ID, and he said that Brianna had just called and Chase was unconscious and she couldn't get him awake. I knew instantly it was bad. Like, there's no reason for my baby to be unconscious. He's completely healthy. There's nothing that's ever been wrong with him. The rescue squad members talked to me on the phone for a little bit and said they had already started to resuscitate him and the life flight was coming, which I already knew because I was at work at the hospital and I heard the helicopter take off, so I knew it was for him. And that was just so hard. We finally got to see him then in the ICU just for a few minutes. They let us see him. He was very white, like whiter than white, and cold, like he didn't feel real at all. His head was all wrapped up where they had taken about half of his skull off of his head to let his brain swell. The neurosurgeon, he said he would give him a 10 to 20% chance of survival. All of his blood vessels were ripped and shredded down off of his head. I just thought he would never live. Our daycare provider was essentially Chase's cousin's mom, is who did this. Her story was that he fell off the couch and just never woke up.
It's very rare for someone to show up and say, I just shook my baby, I just got frustrated. Household falls, off counters, off beds, off changing tables do not cause any significant injury. We know that from experience, and it also doesn't make much sense if babies were to die. Every time that would happen, we'd have a lot more dead babies. It doesn't work.
What we have to recognize is that there are precipitating factors that lead to a bad decision of shaking a baby or doing other things that harm a child. And the most common precipitators are stress. A bad day at the office, getting laid off, losing your home because of mortgage foreclosure, having a fallout with a very close friend. All these things bring about tension, bring about stress that unfortunately sometimes cloud the better judgment that we want to have, especially around our children. We know for a fact there are certain things that we have to avoid, and stress, alienation, things like that we can do. We have the ability as a community and as a nation to change that. My question is, why aren't we?
16 años después de que Chase fuera sacudido, ahora está en el último año de la escuela secundaria en Randolph, Nebraska, el hermano mayor de 6 hermanos.
I would have never guessed back in 2008 that we would have ever been going to his high school graduation. In 5th grade, he was able to start band, and he started playing the trumpet because we thought that was the only one-handed instrument he could do. But even that, the vision was a huge battle to read the music and be able to see the notes and follow them. He plays the bass drum, he plays the tambourine, he plays the shaker, anything in the percussion, whatever he can do, he'll play it.
The bass drum is a fun instrument. I feel like it's just fun because you get to, sometimes you can get the band off track if you get off beat. Sometimes I speed up and then the whole band goes with it.
And then bowling is the most recent thing, which he loves.
We have practice every day and then we have like a couple meets we go to.
And he is not just a bowler on the team, he's the team captain. He has a lot of physical deficits that are hard, of just only being able to use his right hand, and his walking is less than stellar for sure. There's not enough hours in the day to stretch and get to therapy or money, time and money to get all of this accomplished. Vision is probably our biggest battle. There's no fix for that. Where some of their body things, we've been able to do some surgeries. There's some of that stuff that we've been able to help with. It's not gonna fix what damage has been done, and there's just no way around that huge obstacle.
I stock shelves at the grocery store, like just the stuff that doesn't have to be cold. My friends work there and it's just something for me to do.
It's that child's entire life, if they survive.
For 20 seconds of being mad or however long a person was mad is absolutely not worth it when you could have just taken a break, and you can never reverse it. It's permanent.
Al igual que Chase, Alexis ahora tiene 17 años y está en el último año de la escuela. Ha pasado miles y miles de horas en intensa terapia física, ocupacional y terapia del habla, desde el día en que se lastimó. Alexis recuperó la vista, pero está lejos de ser perfecta. Ella lee a un nivel de 2º grado, principalmente porque sus ojos cambian incontrolablemente, casi continuamente, como resultado de su lesión cerebral. Su brazo derecho está doblado en una flexión constante, como resultado de la incapacidad de su cerebro para enviarle los mensajes correctos. Es probable que Alexis nunca tenga ningún uso funcional de su brazo derecho. Puede caminar con mucha ayuda, pero nunca de forma independiente. Alexis pasa la mayor parte del día en su silla de ruedas eléctrica. Necesita ayuda para toda y cada una de las actividades físicas diarias. Levantarse de la cama, pasando a una silla, incluso algo como ponerse un collar. Ayuda que necesitará por el resto de su vida.
When the brain is injured like that, it doesn't send the right nerve impulses to the muscles and development. So the children end up with essentially cerebral palsy. So they end up with an inability to move correctly. So sometimes the muscles are too weak, sometimes they're almost too strong, so they end up being too tight. They can have trouble walking, they can have trouble using the bathroom. A lot of our activities of daily living, getting up, going to the bathroom, brushing your teeth, eating, can be impacted as a result of that.
Como hace 1 año y medio después de que Alexis fue lastimada, conocimos a Antonio, quien estaba rehabilitándose en el mismo hospital que Alexis. Tristemente, nos enteramos que se estaba recuperando de exactamente la misma lesión que Alexis y Chase. La historia de Antonio comenzó con su abuela, Dina, una pastora en Omaha, Nebraska, quien fue la madre adoptiva del padre de Antonio.
It was late at night, and I received a phone call from Antonio's birth mom that he wasn't breathing and they were taking him to the hospital. She called again as I was driving in, and she was hysterical and said there was something else going on and they wouldn't let her see Antonio. And then she began to unfold that they suspected something else had taken place. My son is bipolar and had had a very bad psychotic break about 6 months before and was not taking his medication. With his lack of medication and his instability that night, I still don't know the whole story myself, but he was not at all in a stable place. Yeah, it shook him. It is so hard as a mom and a grandma. I feel like I've lost everything in my family in this. I love my son. I've loved him from the beginning, and that doesn't go away. At the same time, I'm angry with him and disappointed, and I wrestle with all of that, and I wonder how anybody could do this to this sweet, innocent baby. And I love Antonio, like nothing else. This can happen to anybody. I talked with my son about shaking babies before Antonio was born, and on those days that I feel guilty about this, because I do, he's reminded me, Mom, you talked to me about it.
Some people just don't know. They think a child is doing something to aggravate them. Well, this is normal child development. People think, oh, the baby's crying to just get me angry. She should know she shouldn't be crying. It's not about you. It's about that child at that developmental point.
It's not personal. Your child is going to cry. It's normal to cry. If you're frustrated, if you're tired, if something's going on, it's okay to sit them down and walk away. I've had so many families that are like, I just can't, I'm not allowed to put them down. You know, I as a parent feel like I have to be able to soothe my child. And they feel responsible and guilty when they can't.
Después de su lesión, Antonio fue bastante afortunado en encontrar una familia increíble para siempre con Melanie Bartlett y su increíble nueva hermana, Brooklyn.
Because of the type of brain injury that he had, he suffers from what they call startle epilepsy or startle seizures. Average day, probably 30 to 40 of those. They're not long and drawn out. They're usually very short. And basically when it happens, all you need to do is just comfort him and tell him, you know, it's okay, and he usually calms down pretty quick.
What do people mistake Antonio for versus what he is?
Well, I think, and it's probably the hardest part of this whole situation of having him and being his mom, is that people will minimize his worth and marginalize him. They see him as this broken and battered little boy, and they think, what a shame, and they don't think anything else about him. They don't see the courageous, brave boy that I know, the strong boy that I know that works so hard for just the smallest little movements. He deals with the effects of somebody else's choice every single moment of every single day. And I hope that by doing this, that people see that this is real, this is a real child. And when they're getting to that point where they're about to lose control, I hope that it's his image or Alexis's image or one of the other kids' image that they see that makes them not do this.
Después de toda una vida de complicaciones médicas que se remontan a cuando fue sacudido a los 2 meses de edad, Antonio Bartlett falleció el 30 de marzo de 2022 a la edad de 11 años.
One of his favorite nurses at Children's was Sam. And she writes, Antonio constantly reminded me why I love nursing. He was by far my favorite patient ever. I remember the first time I met him, he had my heart instantly with his perfect face. I know he had a way with the ladies. Getting to know him was by far the biggest blessing I've ever experienced. Though I didn't know him long, he will have a forever lasting impact on my heart and soul. And I know I am one of so many who feel the same way. Thank you for letting me be your nurse, and thank you for letting me love you. Until we meet again. Nurse Sam.
citas médicas y cirugías eran una parte constante de la vida de Antonio, al igual que lo son para Alexis. Ella ha tenido más de una docena de cirugías en los últimos 16 años, muchas de ellas significativas. Después de traer puesto un aparato ortopédico para la espalda durante años, su escoliosis empeoró tanto que Alexis tuvo que tener una fusión espinal completa. Ahora vive con 2 varillas de metal en su espalda que van desde sus caderas hasta cerca de su cuello. Alexis tiene una bomba del tamaño de un disco de hockey, incorporada en su abdomen que proporciona una dosis constante de relajante muscular a su columna vertebral. Ella tuvo que tener una cirugía de cadera tan complicada que menos de 5 cirujanos en los Estados Unidos la realizan. Tiene que ver con quebrarle la pelvis dándole vuelta al fémur y unirlo de nuevo con tornillos. El cuerpo humano está hecho para vivir de cierta manera para mantener la salud. Un camino que es imposible de vivir para estos niños por las lesiones cerebrales que sufrieron cuando eran pequeños.
When a child's shaken, their head goes through the movement of an arc. Their neck muscles are very, very weak, and their head is very heavy compared to their body. So there is a very large amount of rotating that those heads go through, frequently to the point where their chin will hit their chest and the back of their head will hit their back. And that movement in itself, actually, what it does is it basically shakes the brain apart. And that's what happens in these children. So the brain gets pulled apart, and that's what eventually leads to them stopping breathing, losing blood supply, and then the brain continuing to cycle into injury and sometimes even death.
Christine Ainsvar ha vivido las mismas luchas que nosotros con su hijo Ethan, un sobreviviente del síndrome del bebé sacudido de 21 años.
It was about 9:50 in the morning when I had gotten a phone call from the daycare provider, and she said that Ethan wasn't acting right and that maybe I should take him into the ER or take him into his family pediatrician. And so I called Ethan's dad. So he went to go check out the situation, and when he arrived, Ethan was laying in a pack and play. He was completely paralyzed on his right side. He was raking his left hand back and forth. His head was facing to the left and he was moaning. The babysitter didn't call 911 at all. My ex-husband, Ethan's dad, had to call 911. They did a CAT scan and saw bleeding and swelling on his brain. The daycare provider initially said that he fell out of a bouncy chair and hit his head. The injuries that were occurring on his brain, the swelling and bleeding, would not be caused from him falling out of a bouncy chair. My naive thought was, he's okay and we'll be bringing him home in a couple days. It was 24 hours later that they confirmed that he had been shaken. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
When he came out of the coma, he was paralyzed on his right side. We left the hospital almost a month later and then didn't have seizures until his first birthday. And he started having breakthrough seizures, and it was like 1 every 2 weeks. They determined that when she shook him, she completely damaged the whole left side of his brain. And that's where all of the seizures were stemming from. And a week later, we were down in St. Louis for brain surgery, where they went in and removed part of the cortex and disconnected the 2 hemispheres. The left side of his brain is no longer there.
Ethan ahora tiene 21 años de edad y vive en Kearney, Nebraska.
He found a home within band. It was good because he is such a social kid that everybody within band just accepted him and treated him like a normal high school student. The things that I wasn't prepared for was the transition, because he was a social student and loves being around people. That transition from being at the high school, then going into the 18 to 21 program, that transition program, I wasn't prepared how it would impact Ethan emotionally with his mental health. It was a huge transition for us as a family.
I like working as a host in a restaurant on weekends and dishwasher Tuesday, Friday, Saturday. Some things might be hard for me to do, but I just have to adapt to like what your strengths are and what your limitations are.
The smile that he brings to people's faces and being such a social human being, and when we're out places and people that know him, oh hey, it's Ethan. It's pretty awesome.
Nice to see him having fun playing sports, watching him go to Special Olympics and stuff like that, and also bowling. I say we're probably pretty even on bowling. He might be just a little bit better because he's had more practice.
You always hope like that he'll get more function out of that arm or be able to use it, because you see the struggles that he goes through, whether it's cooking or doing laundry. Not having that extra hand definitely makes tasks longer for him to do, but he never complains. Ever since he was in kindergarten, my goal for him was to live on his own, was to be independent. I don't know if we're quite there yet, but that still is my goal. I understand how someone can get to that breaking point, but what I don't understand is crossing that threshold, crossing that line. And it's so important to be able to recognize when you get to that point, to have strategies, coping skills, to know what to do from that next point, whether it's call somebody, walk away, find a stress reliever for you, but to be able to recognize when you get to that point is so important.
Llevamos a Alexis a su primera obra en vivo cuando tenía 5 años. Se enamoró del teatro y ha participado en más de 2 docenas de obras desde entonces. Alexis se mete de completo en su personaje cada vez, incluso inventando historias de fondo para los personajes que interpreta y que no tienen ninguna. No debería ser una sorpresa. ¿Quién no disfrutaría interpretando a otras personas cuando la persona que es todos los días en la vida real fue determinada por otra persona en unos pocos segundos de coraje cuando tenía 14 meses? Hay 2 razones por las que produjimos este video. Primero, a los padres, futuros padres o cuidadores, piensen cuidadosamente y evalúen a cualquier persona que esté cuidando a su hijo. En nuestro caso, al igual que en el de los otros 3 niños que aparecen en este video, había sospechas antes de que se produjera el traumatismo craneoencefálico traumático o el ser sacudido. Confíe en sus instintos y cualquier señal inusual en su hijo.
The parent is probably the best person to understand something's going on. It may not be abuse, but something's going wrong. A parent knows their child's moods, they know their habits, and when those moods or habits change, I think that ought to be the first red flag that goes up and says, I wonder if this is a developmental thing that is normal, or is this something that has happened to my child that I should be interested in finding out? It's a sign of courage that a parent cares more about their child than maybe about the personal feelings that people might have about them.
I've had so many cases, what we call sentinel bruising, which is the infant had a bruise and everyone kind of dismissed it. And educating the families on, no, that's not okay. And there has to be a good reason for that bruise. And asking some of those questions and educating people about what you should look for. Bruising in an infant should really not occur without an appropriate history. Infants roll off beds, they get a bruise on their forehead. They get 1 bruise and nothing else. An infant who's got 3 bruises on their arm, you've got to be more concerned that something may have happened to them.
En el caso de Alexis, otros 2 adultos tenían conocimiento de los abusos que ocurrían en su guardería meses antes de que ella fuera agredida, pero nunca la denunciaron a las autoridades ni a otros padres. Puede parecer obvio, es absolutamente esencial que, como comunidad, nunca dudemos en informar incluso del más mínimo indicio de que el bienestar de un niño está en peligro.
I always thought that the well-being of children is just one of the fundamental tenets of a well-functioning society. And if we can't figure out how to care for kids, then there's not much else that matters.
En segundo lugar, este video está producido específicamente para usted, el espectador. Aunque no tenga planes de tener hijos por años o sea un padre joven, está a punto de tener su segundo o tercer hijo, o un abuelo, una niñera o un proveedor de guardería, incluso un novio, un amigo cercano o un familiar de alguien con un niño. Esta tragedia se desarrolla a diario en todo nuestro país, la mayoría de las veces por personas que verían este video y pensarían para sí mismas que nunca le harían eso a un niño. Pero una y otra vez, estas mismas personas no pueden superar un momento intenso de estrés y tomar una mala decisión en una fracción de segundo, que termina con una vida o incapacita a un niño para toda la vida.
Anybody that's caring for children for an extended period of time, where they're the person that's responsible, and I'm talking about hours, they need to have in their mind every morning some plan that's going to talk about what their escape hatch is. Take a temperature. How are you feeling today? Do you have a headache? You're probably going to be a little short-tempered. Think about how that's going to change how you're going to act with these children. Do you have activities planned? Are you have breaks built in? We certainly can plan for some of the ongoing stress we think we're going to see. And we get complacent. We think we've done it. Why do drivers have accidents? Because they think, oh, I've driven for so long, I don't need to keep two hands on the wheel. I can multitask and talk on the phone and listen to the radio and eat a sandwich all while I'm driving a car. And sometimes you can't do it.
In the people I've talked to who have done it, especially those usually parents who've lost it, they can't conceive that they ever would have done it prior. So it's not something that you think about ahead of time. A number of them aren't bad people, they just lose it.
Así que nuestra súplica es esta. Un día, cuando te encuentres en la misma situación que Ethan o la guardería de Alexis, el padre de Antonio o la niñera de Chase, cuando un bebé o un niño no está haciendo lo que usted quiere o lo que usted cree que debería hacer, recuerde las caras de Antonio, Ethan, Chase y Alexis. Recuerden las imágenes de ellos cerca de la muerte. Recuerden las imágenes de ellos luchando con la vida todos los días. Recuerde las luchas que llevarán toda su vida. Recuérdalos en ese momento y simplemente aléjate.
Hi, I'm Alexis Verzal, and here's a few things to remember about shaken baby syndrome. The people who you've seen in this video are victims of shaken baby syndrome. But I want you to know that toddlers and older children can also be injured or killed from abusive head trauma. No baby has ever died from crying too much. Remember, babies cry to communicate and relieve stress. It's not meant to make you feel like a bad parent or caregiver. If someone calls you needing help with a crying baby, always offer your help. Here are some tips to cope with a crying baby. Remember the 10-foot rule. Place the baby in a safe place and stay 10 feet away until you calm down. You can also take deep breaths and count to 10. Put the baby in their crib and leave for 10 minutes. Close your eyes and think about a peaceful time in your life. Take a warm bath or shower. Play music that calms you down or do some exercise. Always remind yourself the crying will end. And please, never ever shake a baby.